In a world where trust and love intertwined, I, a father of two, cherished my life with Tracy. But beneath the surface, Tracy harbored secrets, orchestrating nights out as a cover, her loyalty dancing in the shadows. Utilizing a separate phone, she wove a web of deceit, believing she could elude the inevitable. "Why the secrecy, Tracy?" I questioned, my voice heavy with betrayal, as the echo of her whispered lies through clandestine calls shattered our facade. This is my story, navigating through the remnants of trust. Enjoy watching it. Hello, my name is Dave, and I am 41 years old. I grew up in a small mining town, and if you had a similar childhood, you may identify my symptoms. You see, in my town, being intelligent was not socially acceptable, and I was brilliant. Kids were bullied and subjected to a horrible hell, so I learned to hide it. The secret was to avoid using complex words and speak like everyone else. I believe a few folks were surprised when I graduated from high school as valedictorian of my class of approximately 100 late those fools. I left town to attend college and had no plans to return. I was fortunate that my parents broke the mold of their blue-collar origins by encouraging and supporting my dreams. 7 years later, I graduated with honors from mining and engineering and began my profession. I didn't understand it at the time, but 10 years of primary school had conditioned me to continue hiding my brilliance. After a while, I realized it was a professional advantage. Believing I was average intelligence gave others a false sense of superiority until a confrontation arose, at which point I went for bust and won 9 times out of 10. They just underestimated me. You probably believe this makes me sound pompous and manipulative, but you're mistaken. At the time of this story, I'm a successful mine manager earning a 6-figure salary with hefty bonuses. The reason for the latter was that I had taken over a struggling break, including mine, and transformed it into a money machine. With my blue-collar background, I approached this in my own unique way. I had transformed the entire crew into a friendly team that shared in the mine's financial success. Everyone was happy and gaining affluent. 8 years into my work, I met Tracy. He swept her off her feet and married her. Tracy had given me 2 great sons, ages 6 and 8, when this narrative was written. They are the center of my universe and the cause for my existence. I know I'm not like other males who are drawn to women's physical characteristics, such as huge jugs and attractive bottoms. My first attraction is to their minds. If they are not intelligent, I am not interested. How do you assess intelligence? Easy. It's all about the eyes. One look in the eyes tells the entire narrative. Tracy was quite intelligent. The wonderfully shaped jugs on a little 5 feet 6-inch frame, topped with a gorgeous face, were an added treat. My beautiful wife and soulmate had a similar upbringing to mine. Her tradesman father and overprotective stay-at-home mother had supplied for her. Well, there is only one character defect. Her mother has almost completely shattered her confidence. Her mother was a bully. Her father was essentially a silent partner. Whatever remarks he could muster were shot down. Tracy was consequently extremely shy, unconfident, and had a poor self-image. This was unjustified, and I enjoyed her body just fine. I had spent our courtship and marriage attempting to boost her confidence and body image by praising her on her accomplishments and admiring her figure. It was like attempting to paddle a canoe against a powerful current. Lee is a well-known husband among married men. Compliments don't have much weight. Her father passed away shortly after we began to recover from liver cancer. Her mother died from cancer of the entire body only 2 years ago. Tracy's parents, unlike mine, did not foster her intelligence. After high school, she took a secretarial course. I met her while she was the receptionist or secretary at the mine where I was working as an undermanager. Within 2 weeks, we were an item. God, I loved and admired that girl for years in 2 distinct ways. Later, we married and had our first son, who made all of the decisions. We chose to move somewhere more civilized to raise our family. Don't get me wrong, I love the mining industry. It's fulfilling and thrilling. But why are the mines located in the heart of the world's largest desert? I lived in some shitholes. We were able to discover a location 125 minutes from a regional hub with a population of 100,000. It was a beautiful and comfortable location to live. We both loved it. The people were pleasant and hospitable, and Tracy quickly developed a strong support network of other mothers who met together or in small groups virtually every day. I know I'm going to offend a few people with my next statement, but one of the things people enjoy about me is my candor. Mother's job description is, in my opinion, the highest rank in society, higher than the president, general, secretary general of the United Nations, and every other title on the planet. We're here to raise physically and psychologically healthy children. While I understand the importance of both parents working to put food on the table in some cases, I despise instances in which both parents of babies work to further their careers or finance a lifestyle they do not require. One of you should stay at home and become a parent. It's exactly what the kid needs. Tracy fortunately agrees, and until our youngest son, who was born shortly after our last move, began school, she was content to remain a stay-at-home parent. The challenge for an intelligent person is that being a full-time parent is not the most intellectually exciting profession in the world. Recognizing this, I tried everything I could to keep the stimulation going. We treasured our late-night conversations after the boys had gone to bed. I let her spend as much time away from the boys as she wanted when I wasn't working. Girls' nights out were a fortnightly event. At the very least, I took care of the boys while she attended adult education classes at night or on weekends, and we hired babysitters and went out together about once a month. Existence was good, and I was content with my soul partner and all other aspects of my existence. The first big source of contention arose innocently after the lads were in bed one night. We were watching television when they announced that they were conducting an IQ test. Over the following hour and a half, they planned to ask the questions and then allow individuals to email or text their answers. It was a sort of national IQ survey. They informed individuals that because these tests are timed, all writing of responses should halt at the end of the quiz. The final half hour of the broadcast focused on the answers and how to calculate the score. Tracy and I agreed it would be fun and sat down to take the test together. Tracy finished with a score of 124, while I had 136. Both made sense to me, but Tracy refused to accept the results and claimed the test was flawed. She was quite upset about it and refused to SMS the results. I was puzzled, to say the least. The following night, at the same time, she revealed that she had located another IQ test online, taken it that day, and received a score of 132. She asked me to do it. I sat on the couch beside her with my laptop and scored 141. Tracy was clearly agitated. Over the next month, she discovered 6 more, which we completed. The outcomes were basically the same. I am probably 15 points ahead of her. She refused to tell me why this was important to her or why it bothered her. I was going through a busy period at work and didn't have time or energy to think about it much. However, I forced myself to think about it over the weekend. I knew it was significant. I couldn't figure out why she was so angry, and that bothered me. I've always been a fan of Arthur Conan Doyle, and through his character Sherlock Holmes, I acquired his manner of dealing with problems that have no clear solution. Disregard the impossible. Whatever remains, no matter how unlikely, must be true. Tracy thought she was brighter than me, which was the most implausible solution I could think of. She was furious when the tests revealed the opposite. Was she resentful because she, the smarter one, worked as a secretary while I was a successful professional? Once I identified the problem, the answer was obvious. On our next snuggling night, I told you about my early intelligence-hiding behavior. I came straight with her and apologized for what appeared to be such ingrained behavior that I had even misled her. She seemed to take it well and favorably, even going so far as to say she understood it. It complemented her school experience as well. In some ways, an intelligent girl was more socially unacceptable in small communities than a bright boy. A really terrible indictment of the ethics and morals of our early years. I believed having a heart-to-heart had solved the situation. I was mistaken. I didn't notice until much later that she began to put more effort into winning our disputes than she had previously. Mick was absent from school while we were with our youngest. Tracy had 6 hours each day to fill. We reviewed her alternatives in the same way that a successful partnership does. She wanted to return to work, but I recommended something else. With such a sharp mind, she may return to school. In the end, we agreed to both. She enrolled in a distance education naturopathy school and looked for a part-time secretarial position. I would watch the kids at night so she could study at home. I'd even help with shopping, housework, and cooking. She swiftly landed a part-time job as an attorney's secretary. It was 5 days a week, and she began each day after dropping the kids off at school. Her supervisor was an older man, who was nearing the end of his career. He only worked short hours and accepted a restricted number of cases. There were only 3 of them in the office. Tracy quickly became close friends with the third, a 40-something married paralegal lady. The office was an old house around 20 minutes' drive from home with a small caseload. The job was extremely cyclical, with no major cases on. Tracy may only work 3 hours per day with a large case on the go. She would work till the time she needed to depart to pick up the kids from school. She was asked to stay for an extra day or 2 every month to assist. She was happy to oblige, and if a phone call to me didn't get me home early enough, one to marry the widower next door who also served as our babysitter did. Tracy hesitantly declined overtime when she wasn't available. Everyone was pleased. Tracy was energized and busy. The girls' nights continued, and our monthly date nights remained constant. Apart from our date nights, I didn't have much social engagement because I was either working or spending time with Tracy and the children. No outside activities such as poker nights or bowling. Nothing suited me. I had all I needed and wanted. Tracy returned to work 6 months ago. In the next hour, my life will take an unexpected turn. I just didn't realize it yet. She worked late. I had picked up the lads, driven them home, and begun dinner. I was glad to go home early. I got the impression all day that I had left the notepad on the study desk the night before. The notebook contained a loose sheet containing the findings of my project, which I would only see after I got home. I discovered the notepad, but the list was gone. I went out to the garage, swallowed my pride, and emptied the recycle bin onto the floor. After putting everything non-papery back in the bin, I began going through the paper. There's no thrill in the loose paper. What about the discarded items that are balled up? I knew I hadn't scrunched up my list, but could Tracy have found it? Whoops. If she did, it would require some explanation. I hid the list at the back of one of the 5 spare notepads in the desk drawer, not at the top of the pile. I started scrunching the balls of paper that were still on the garage floor. There were just 6. The second one marked the beginning of my descent into a new, far less idyllic existence. I was about to disregard it because it was Tracy's handwriting when I spotted an underlined heading on a piece of paper. I smoothed out the page and read what was clearly a list. Her immaculate writing included a photo of a voice recorder caught in the act while driving home early. Telephone call, overheard. Text message on a cell phone. Sleep chatter. Bluffed into giving things away either by admission or body language observed in public. A pal ratted me out. Car seen at a motel. Make eye contact with another individual in public. Hidden letters and presents. Laundry. At this point, I knew what the list was. It was a list of YouTube channels. A channel that primarily features stories of how couples have been discovered cheating. Tracy does not trust me. I assumed it was a little blow. I had my own trust difficulties. Why not, Tracy? I gave her a YouTube account, but she lost interest in Chronicles when she started school at the beginning of the year. After the kids went to bed, I'd spend some time on my laptop watching stories. I made no secret about it, and I frequently told Tracy that if I came across a particularly interesting story, I was seeking for suggestions on how to improve our sex lives. I told her the juicy details to attempt to get her fired up. She began viewing some as well. It must have looked odd seeing us both lying in bed. It worked, and I'd had fewer rejections in the last 2 months. Another thing I did was take note of the stories she spent the most time watching and then watch them myself to see what piqued her interest. Again, I was looking for tips on how to improve our love life. She would watch the story and, if she liked it, browse for more stories on the same channel. One night she came to bed after studying and snuggled up to me, staring at the screen of my laptop. "What is that all about?" she asked. I told her it was a story about a husband who caught his wife cheating and punished her severely. "Why are you watching those stuff?" she asked. I responded by asking if she had ever been cheated on, and she said no. I admitted I had been and expressed how sad I had been. I mentioned that seeing other people's revenge stories relieved my remaining memories. I had never informed her about being cheated on, and she asked if I would mind telling her the specifics. I did mind. It stung even after all these years because we shared everything. I met Cindy in my final year of university in another state. She attended the residential college next door and was in her second year of an art degree. We instantly clicked and became inseparable. We began having sex immediately after, but had to keep it very private, despite having a European name. Cindy was a second-generation Chinese with extremely strict parents. If her parents had heard anything, she would have been kicked out of the residence. I didn't tell Tracy that we had sex like rabbits all year, and it was the finest sex I'd ever had. The following year, I returned to my native state to work. Cindy stayed behind to finish her final year, and we maintained a healthy, long-distance relationship. I flew up around once a month to visit her. After our second year, she came and lived with me for the summer, and I proposed to my brand-new girlfriend before moving 3 hours down the road to the state capital to pursue a one-year diploma of education to become a teacher with a BA. There were no opportunities for employment in a small mining town. They were, however, crying for teachers. She stayed at my brother's house in the state capital, although he was gone for the majority of the year on business. Every weekend I drove down or she drove up. As a Chinese woman with a strong work ethic, she also worked as a server at the local casino. We also met a divorcee named Joe, who lived up the road from my brother's house one week while on the phone discussing the upcoming weekend. She said that she had to work on Saturday and that Joe had asked her to accompany him to his company's annual dinner on Friday. As a trustworthy guy, I agreed and said I'd come down Saturday morning instead of Friday night. I'm still a little ashamed by how naive I was at that age. That's what occurred. We spent Saturday together till she left for work. She normally worked at 5 p.m. until 9 p.m., but if they were busy, she might be asked to work until midnight, which is 10 p.m. She was not home, and I was struggling to remain awake. I decided to walk to Joe's apartment for workout. It was roughly 2 minutes to the end of the street, then up a 60-meter dirt driveway to Joe's house. I was astonished as I neared his house. The Alpha I had purchased was right in front of his house. Cindy. There appeared to be a bit of a party going on at home. I couldn't get too close since there were folks standing on the porch smoking. I was still puzzled as heck. Cindy and Joe emerged around half an hour later and walked to the car. I was hiding behind a wall fairly near her car. I couldn't see them, but I could hear plainly. I heard her ask, "Why do you keep trying to kiss me?" He mumbled something about how attractive she looked. There was silence for a time. I looked over the wall. They were doing a full-on tongue tango. I was stunned. I quickly entered crisis mode. This was a mode I felt quite comfortable with. In times of crisis, some people become panicked. I entered the mode known as clinical, decisive, and calculating. I could nearly turn my emotions off with effort. It was a characteristic that had served me well throughout my career. People familiar with the mining business understand how quickly seemingly innocent incidents may devolve into chaos. Military personnel on active duty and airline pilots should be familiar with it. After a minute, they parted ways, and he inquired when he could see her again. She had a limited amount of time to respond. He invited her over after dinner the following night. All 3 participants in this private charade were fully aware that I would be returning to my hometown the following evening, but my name was not mentioned. Her behavior up to this point was forgivable, but I would give her enough rope to hang herself. I put the larger issue aside and focused on the immediate difficulty of getting home before her. Fortunately, she realized she had left her purse at his place, and they returned to recover it. When she arrived, she found it in bed, pretending to be asleep. I won't go into detail about the rest of the narrative I told Tracy, but in essence, I feigned to leave late the next afternoon, right at nighttime. Then she returned to hide in the vacant block across the street till she drove to Joe's house. I followed her on foot, then observed through the window until they'd finished talking and foreplaying on the couch before sneaking into the bedroom through an open window. I took out copies of my bank card, MasterCard, car key, and my brother's house key from her purse. As an afterthought, I took all of the cash from her wallet as payment for my understanding and effort. I then paused as the sounds of their passion ripped at my soul. I was wondering whether she would do her specialty. I left the home, unlocked her car, and backed it down to the Bitterman with the engine turned off before starting it and driving it to my brother's house. I secured it in the shed after removing her personal belongings. I then cleared her belongings from the house and dumped them down the back stairs. Despite the late hour, I called her mother and explained my side of the story, as well as the fact that she would need to assist their daughter in returning home. I secured the doors and returned home. Cindy called 3 times after that, and I hung up on her. I accepted a phone call from her father, who apologized for his daughter's behavior. I never saw nor heard from the witch again. Tracy could tell from the intensity in my speech that I was still greatly impacted by this experience, and she was aware of my feelings toward cheaters. I went on to state that I greatly regretted not exacting greater revenge at the time, and that reading other people's over-the-top stories was cathartic. We snuggled till we fell asleep. So there I was, sitting on the garage floor, feeling depressed because my wife did not trust me. Going back to the list, I continued reading. Dress and behavior changes, unexpected disrespect, refusal of sex hickeys, sloppy makeup, fresh wet hair, or a foul odor were discovered and reported by the other spouse. Credit card and telephone bills. Phone tap partner bragging caught on a girls' night out or party talking about another person frequently before stopping overhearing others chatting kids letting something slip. Fellow females' night, seen elsewhere, or letting things slide. Guilty conscience. Condoms and birth control tablets have been used to date. Rubber was used, as well as empty douches. Lying eyes anonymously reported on a pregnant woman who had lost her wedding band, changed her sexual conduct, discovered phone tapping cameras, and located a diary and phone in her car. My heart was thumping and my ears were ringing by the time I got halfway through this list. I looked back. On a girls' night out or party, sloppy seconds can create a dry or fresh cut. Fellow girls' nighters were spotted somewhere else or letting something go. Pills, an empty douche bag, and a pregnant woman discovered a diary or phone in her car. None of these made sense if they were a list of ways to determine whether I was cheating. They made complete sense. What the hell was going on if you were a lady looking to cheat without being caught? I quickly entered crisis mode. I finished sorting through the remaining scrunched-up papers before tipping the trash out and repeating the process. Nothing. The recycling container is collected every 2 weeks, so I knew the list was current. Tracy arrived home in time for the dinner I'd prepared. I gazed into her eyes before kissing her, but I saw nothing. I forced myself out of the mode and attempted to act normally. I had seen in stories that it was challenging, but each author severely underestimated how difficult it was. Its agony. That night, sleeping was a joke. I began by studying our cooperation for clues. Before I knew it, I was back in the mode. What does any crime require in terms of means, motive, and opportunity? She had the means to accomplish it. Item 1. Sex opportunity times. I'm working while she's not. Girls' nights out involve separate activities. I spent the most of my time on motives. I reflected on all of the stories I had watched. The majority boiled down to disrespecting a virgin bride's desire for new experiences, searching for a more enjoyable tool, escape from an unsatisfactory sex life. There are no solutions there. There was no reason to show rudeness. I'd always treated her properly and had a respectable career and salary. I knew she'd had a half-dozen sex partners before me, so I couldn't imagine curiosity being the motivation. And disappointing sexual experience that struck a chord. I had an extremely disappointing one. Tracy didn't seem to be interested in sex. By a year into our marriage, our once-a-week fall had grown tedious. I had to initiate it 95% of the time and received 2 rejections for each success. She denied having fantasies and refused to engage in anything other than heterosexual sex. Don't get me wrong. She seemed to enjoy it when we did it, and I didn't stop until she was at least satisfied. And they were genuine. I'd found that complimenting her on certain portions of her body made her more responsive. I knew she had a negative body image, but I ran out of ideas after a few months, so it had vanished. My thoughts turned to a time approximately a year ago when my hopes had been raised. I had her lying on her stomach, stroking her with my hand. I assumed she would realize where this was going and was waiting for her to object. To my surprise, her moans grew louder. I kept going for 5 minutes, and she reached a plateau again. With high hopes for the future, I cuddled up to her, only to be told 5 minutes later that, while she had enjoyed it, it would not happen again. No, the concept of her having an affair for sexual reasons simply did not make sense. After ruling out any sex-related reasons, I realized that the only other reason I could think of at 2 a.m. was emotional. I hardly ever traveled. I spent all of my leisure time at home with her and the kids, and I made an effort to never show that she was less important to me than the children. I helped her with the house and children far more than other men. Shit. I helped her in whatever way I could. We cuddled a lot, talked readily and deeply, and made all significant decisions together. Sure, we didn't kiss for hours like teenagers, but who could expect us to? I was still romantic. To avoid undervaluing the gesture, I bought her flowers and chocolates on a regular basis and never approached her for sex on those occasions. Reflecting on it. Most of the time she had initiated sex, I had done this, but it was not an expectation. I couldn't think of anything other than dismissing the impossible day. Could she have found someone better than me? That was not implausible, so I couldn't dismiss it. If that is the case, our marriage might be in peril. Had she previously met anyone? Did she already start cheating? I'm not sure what time I fell asleep, but I awoke with a start and a nagging idea. I got up, put on my work attire, and retrieved the folded sheet of paper from my pocket. Yes, I was correct. The list was so long that it took up the entire page. Was there another page? It had not been discarded. If it existed, where was it? I had extensively searched the desk yesterday looking for my list, so I knew it wasn't there. Then I got an idea, went into the study, and took the blank pad off the top of the desk, placing it in my work bag. I went to work. The morning round of meetings was abnormally slow. Today, I was far off my game, distracted with business on autopilot. I returned to my workplace and browsed the internet. I started by Googling, recovering impressions from paper, and then making a few improvements. This gave me an answer. I remembered how a childhood spent reading detective fiction had finally paid off. A brief visit to the hardware shop, a single bottle of graphite powder. Back in my office, I shut the door and took out the blank notebook from my bag. I followed the instructions and sprinkled the ultrafine graphite powder on the pad's first page. Then, softly from the side, I blew the most of it off the page. Yes, you guessed it. My hunch that a second page had been written on and then removed was correct. In all good detective novels, the imprint from the previous page is indented on the following page. If my blood hadn't been boiling so much, I might have smiled at the vague but obviously legible title of the concealed pages with writing to do. I had the remaining 1% of my doubts eliminated. The second page contains no photographs. Weekly, check for a voice recorder or tracker in the automobile. Check DCC bills and bank records. Never bring Al home. Speak with him on the phone or mobile at home. Never speak to Al on a new phone. Only get a second phone. Leave it at work. Never keep it in your purse or car. Unreadable, first letter says. Practice being bluffed. There are no speech or body language reactions. Do not inform anyone about him or appear in public areas. Travel individually. Do not meet somewhere close and keep your car hidden. Avoid eye contact with L in public. Tell L that there will be no letters or presents. Hickeys and soap. Showers do not wet hair, douche. Check once a week. Not clothing or acting differently. Maintain a rating of 4 to 5. Indistinct. Indistinct. Aspect wear is minimal. When heading out, put on makeup. Check before returning. Disposable panties pads are worn with elegance when bragging and talking. Take these precautions with him. New bank account, second phone, P.O. boxes are all kept at work. Learn how to check for phone taps and watch DS behavior for changes. Never mention a last name to DD or anyone else. Meet one in every 5 random Genoese. Never ignore Gino's sorry conscience. See how things go. Condoms, spermicide, work, disposal, and douche. Never remove rings. Write nothing down. At the bottom was what could only be described as a grocery list. Nubia phone, P.O. box douches, condoms, colors, underwear, pads, the cold, and clinical. Unless one of these options made the dread and fury I was experiencing seem ridiculous. Now, examining my credit card and bank statements could only mean she was looking to see if I had acquired any surveillance equipment. The comment about being bluffed was especially frigid, as I felt she was practicing a reaction to me. If I were to accuse her of something, to plan and pay for her tryst, she planned to open a separate bank account and obtain a second phone. So I didn't see the bills or any correspondence. She planned to set up a post office box as the address for the accounts. So I never saw the second phone. It was going to be kept at her workplace, GA. I could only interpret as girls' evenings out what the whole meaning of MIT 1 and 5 random Genos never skip out on Genos was. I wasn't sure if she didn't skip any evenings, and none of her friends would know about her relationship. How could she meet him there? The statement regarding condoms, douches, and spermicide hit me harder than the others. The remainder were quite abstract and may apply to an emotional situation. These goods were specific to where everything was going. It sent an instinctive chill down to my soul. Pregnancy would be a major issue because I got the snip after our second child. The few fuzzy and unreadable lines on the list concerned me only little. I already had enough to sink the witch. If the concealed page had a list of cardinal rules, she had already violated a major one: never write anything down. I thought on my luck in finding the crumpled page in the recycle bin. It made complete sense. I'd never been lucky in the little things in life, never won a contest or raffle, but I was fortunate in the big, crucial things which always seemed to fall perfectly for me. This has never been more true than right now. So now I was presented with an age-old issue. Do I end this garbage right now, or do I see how far it can go? I promptly discounted the first. Everything I'd discovered thus far could be a speculative exercise on her part. Challenging her now could stop it, but it wouldn't explain me why it was happening in the first place, nor would it guarantee that it would not happen again. I hadn't even thought of giving Cindy enough rope to hang herself, but she was just my second girlfriend, and I was in my 20s. Now that I'm 41, it's too late to start over. The bleak, aggravating truth of my predicament had nearly frozen me. I had coached enough of my employees through divorces to understand how they operated. No-fault divorces had been common for many years. Tracy, as the primary carer, would get the children. Our youngest was only 6. I could look forward to having custody one weekend every 2 weeks. I'd also lose my house and have to pay child support and alimony. I didn't care about the money. The children were my reason for being on this planet. Every breath I took served a single goal, and just one certainty was on my mind at the time. I could not live with a cheater. Shit. Was I too late? I looked at the list again. Who was ill? Come on, turn off your emotions, Dave. What did I know? The list was less than 2 weeks old. She already had a boyfriend. It was 2 days till her next girl's night out. I had no idea if she was working this afternoon. Could she be meeting someone right now? The list demonstrated that she was highly clever in avoiding detection, but there was no evidence that she had planned for any consequences of being discovered. She already had a boyfriend. She might already have a second phone and an untraceable source of funds. She already had a boyfriend. Things were critical, and remaining paralyzed in horror would not help. I forced myself into the mood and returned to sensible cognition. I rapidly planned a single trip that would most likely provide me with all I needed. I spent the following hour on the internet, investigating and downloading the $60 payment I made to my company. Credit cards. Yeah, didn't you think about that? This was common. And I filled out the form to go to the accounts department and have this amount taken from my next salary payment. I strolled into my boss's office, conscious of my reputation for honesty. I simply informed him that I was having problems at home and would be unavailable for a bit. He waited for me to elaborate, but when I didn't, he simply answered, "Okay." I departed an hour earlier than normal and purchased a cable. On the way home in my car, I considered how I would treat Tracy if I committed a charm and love offense, intending to guilt her out of it. I could not think of a way to be more loving, considerate, and caring. So, that was out. Should I act normally? I knew it would be difficult to pretend to be normal. I now knew she had a boyfriend. It would be even difficult. Screw it, why should I suffer? I would not act on the anger I felt, but I wouldn't act normally. I'd just be freezing. If my behavior changed just enough, she might stop whatever she was doing. Please give me more time. I reminded myself that there was no evidence she had done anything yet, which gave me hope. When I got home, I generally kissed Tracy first and then went to the kids. This was intentional to show the hierarchy of my affection. This time, when I walked in the door, I went right for the kids to greet them with hugs and talk, adhering to the standard. I inquired how their day was going. Tracy, with a clearly upset expression on her face, interrupted me and approached me for a hug and kiss while I maintained an intentional, neutral appearance. I kissed her on the cheek rather than the lips before breaking off and returning to the children. I couldn't recall the last time. I hadn't asked her how her day had gone. I noticed her puzzled expression out of the corner of my eye. I knew 2 things at the time. She should never play poker, and she should practice responding to bluffs. Questions for me are quite difficult. The remainder of the early evening was ordinary. Dinner stories, bed for the children. She reminded me about her girls' night out on Friday and affirmed that I could look after the kids. I extended the kids' bedtime till 9:15 p.m. As soon as they were down, I declared that I was exhausted and would be going to bed as well. Her being a bloke elicited another puzzled gaze. Brushing your teeth, taking a piss, putting on boxers, and getting into bed are all part of the bedtime routine. Maximum of 3 minutes. Girls appear to have a lot more to do than that, so it was 15 minutes later. She joined me in bed. As I turned my back to her, she slid in and nestled close to me. I stiffened up on purpose, and I could feel her response. So, which of your checklist items involved keeping an eye out for behavioral changes in me? Could I be more clear? I wondered how I went from thinking she was the love of my life to a witch in less than 24 hours. My rage solved that question for me. "Honey, what's wrong?" she said. "Nothing." "Why?" I responded. "You've just been so distant tonight, that's all. Have you had a bad day?" she asked. "No." "I had a good day," I said. Throughout my marriage, I knew that was the first lie I had ever told her. She said nothing more, and fatigued by yesterday night's deliberations, I fell asleep within minutes. I was aware that she had been tossing and turning all night. As usual, I was up and out before anyone else the next morning. I checked Tracy's purse for the missing paper. I was curious about the unreadable lines. There's nothing there. She was covering her bases. Well, I checked her key ring at work. I was considerably better prepared than I had been the day before. I had all of my plans in place, so I was able to put my home difficulties in the background. I planned to take the day off and drove the 40 minutes to the old suburban house that served as my wife's office, arriving shortly after noon. I'd gone there a few times earlier while in town for work. I forced a grin as I strolled into the reception area and asked my astonished wife if she wanted to join me for lunch, listening to my voice. Her supervisor, Lance, came out and we talked. He invited both himself and Ginny. After politely asking me if it was acceptable, the paralegal walked to the ladies' room, while the others left to collect their outerwear. This allowed me to swiftly inspect the area, including Tracy's workstation and the external doorframe. Lunch was pleasant. Yes, I am not dumb. I understand. Lance begins with A. I looked for any subliminal interaction between him and Tracy, but found nothing. What small chat he made wasn't about his family, but about ours, or Jenny's, besides us. He was 25 years older than us. After lunch, I returned to work. At 5 p.m., I called Tracy and lied again. I informed her that we had an incident and that I would need to work late to investigate it. I stayed in town later than usual, then stopped at a bar on the way home for a single beer. At 8 p.m., I entered my home. Tracy must have noticed my car in the driveway when she met me at the door. I avoided her lips and instead kissed her on the cheek. She questioned me about my beer breath. I mentioned that I had opted to conduct the inquiry in a pub to make all of the participants more comfortable. I avoided eye contact and attempted to appear slightly guilty. My objective was to send her into a flat spin. Both last night and tonight might be read as me suspecting her of cheating or beginning to cheat. Keep your opponent on the back foot. She heated up some food for me while I played with the children. After we put kids to bed, I informed Tracy that I was going to bed early again. I told her I wanted to wake up at 3 a.m., go to work. I did this randomly every 3 months or so, and I explained why to her. I wanted my night shift employees to understand that the boss could show up at any time. The idea was to discourage a culture of safety shortcuts during the night shift when supervision was light. Tracy accepted this, and I left without a goodnight kiss. Again, her bewildered expression. I expected her to follow me to bed, so I was relieved when she didn't. I didn't hear her get into bed and didn't know or care what she was doing. I silently woke up at 3 a.m., packed my laptop, grabbed her keys from her handbag, left the home, and drove away. Tracy would have been concerned about my course once I reached the highway rather than turning north towards the mine. I turned south, towards the city. 20 minutes later, I was parked in a residential neighborhood 3 houses up from her office. 5 minutes of observations revealed that everything was silent. I got out of the car and went regularly up the driveway to the office. Someone behaving covertly immediately draws attention. I used her keys to open the front door of her office. My scan from yesterday showed no signs of an alarm on the door or motion sensors in the room. I turned on my low illumination and chose to investigate the obvious area first. Her desk drawers, unsurprisingly, were locked. Even less shocking, the key was also on her key ring. I unlocked them. Top drawer for stationery. Second drawer, hole. Punch and stapler, more stationery. I knew it would be the third and bottom drawer. My heart pulse increased even more as I grabbed for it. After all, I had no proof yet. My pulse was loud when I slipped the drawer open. Manila folder files are held closed using clamps. I slipped my fingertips along the side of the stack of folders, discovering a gap beneath them. I grabbed the entire stack and carefully lifted it out, placing it in the center of her desk, before inserting the torch into the bottom drawer. I felt dizzy when I saw what was disclosed. An iPhone 4 was sitting on top of its box, and beneath it were two A4 envelopes, one with a bank logo. Was the paperwork for a new bank account opened with a $200 sum the previous Monday? It also included a temporary debit card. The second item was the papers for opening a post office box, which included 2 keys. I made a note of the post office address, Box 58 in the suburb where her workplace was located. I also wrote the bank account number in my notebook. Surprisingly, within the packet were 3 dice, a standard 6-sided die and ones with 10 and 20 sides. What the hell? There was also a small stack of business-sized cards secured with a rubber band. I took one out and turned it over, and Tracy's tidy calligraphy was written. Tracy provided a cell number and stated in brackets beneath the text that there were only 10 of them and what their purpose was. I had no idea. Fortunately, there were no douches, condoms, spermicide, underwear, or pads. Could they be someplace else? I looked around the office. Everything else was shared property and accessible to others. Tracy owned only her desk. I concluded and hoped to heck that she hadn't gotten to the point where she needed them yet. The final item in the drawer was, of course, her list. The first indecipherable line in my copy was CFO asking for my phone's code. Her spouse would check her phone first if he felt she was cheating. The second full sentence was to check regularly and not dress or act differently. Maintain 4 to 5 sessions each deeper month. The third line was to show respect for DD and check for indicators of respect. That was clearly a reminder to herself to check herself on a frequent basis to ensure she wasn't treating me disrespectfully, as well as to look for signs of disrespect on my part. And clear clue that I may have ruined her little game. I read and reread this paragraph, but it did not address a vital question for me. Has she stopped respecting me? Sorry, stupid question. How much had she stopped respecting me? I returned everything to the drawer except the phone. I turned it on, relieved that there was no password protection, and plugged it into my laptop using my new cable. The process took longer than the 5 minutes promised on the internet, but no one expected that. After 25 minutes, I was finished. Her phone now included GPS tracking and a cloning capability. Every SMS sent and received on that phone would be copied to my work phone. Every voice call to and from that phone would trigger an alarm on my phone, a separate alert for initiating and receiving calls. Unfortunately, technology had not advanced to that point. All calls could still be recorded, therefore I might miss the start of any calls. A check of Tracy's phone would reveal my malware, but I wasn't meant to know it was there. The battery would drain faster than usual, but since this was a new phone from her usual one, I thought she wouldn't notice. After making sure everything was back in place, I locked up and departed for work. I still had time to talk to the day and night shift supervisors in my office. I turned on my PC and accessed her phone remotely. I have no history of sending or receiving messages or phone calls, so it appears that I may be on the ground floor. I took a shower in the changing room and went home to nap. I arrived 10 minutes before Tracy and the kids departed for school. I kissed on the lips with moist hair, the scent of an unfamiliar soap disinformation time. She reminded me about her girls' night tonight. During my snooze, I watched vengeance stories on YouTube, skimming down to the punchline. They can be summarized as killing the spouse. Planting drugs on her was another way to prove she was an unfit mother, shame her, and get her fired or placed in jail. The only ones I could think of were about embarrassing her or getting her fired. But she'd lost both of her parents to cancer, and I didn't think anyone else would care. What if she lost her job after 6 months? I went back to work and arrived home just before she had to depart for her girls' night. Before leaving, I tested her new phone remotely. Nothing. I considered calling Mary, our babysitter, and spying on her, but I quickly dismissed the idea because she was a lot closer friend to Tracy than I was, and I was sure to be caught. Tracy arrived home before midnight and spent the next 2 weeks in bed. I maintained my chilly demeanor, emotionally withdrawing from Tracy. I tracked her new phone activities all the way until the next girl's night. Nothing. The GPS indicated that the phone had never left her office in the previous 3 weeks. Neither Tracy nor I had attempted to initiate sex. I didn't feel like it in her since, well, she didn't usually start anything. She went out 2 weeks after the stress started. I stayed at home like a nice boy again, but this time I thought about it, really. I couldn't live like this any longer. Was my behavior change holding her back? Let us see. When she came home, I was back in bed, pretending to sleep. But as soon as she slid in, I assaulted her sexually. The next morning, she refused to let me out of bed while holding me in her arms. She told me to sleep in while she went up to care for the boys. After that, I resumed my normal routine, the complete Monty. She appeared confused on the first day, but she quickly recovered. Another 3 weeks, and another girls' night with the mothers group. Another 3 weeks with no phone action. Our quarterly bank statement did arrive, and it indicated an abnormal cash withdrawal of $100 every Friday lunchtime. Aside from that, nothing noteworthy. Was I missing something? Another 2 weeks, another girls' night, and another ineffective monitoring attempt. The only unusual occurrence was a call from Tracy's mobile phone to our residence around 8:30 p.m. She stated they'd left the restaurant and we were going to a club, and she missed us right before she rang off. I heard her tipsy buddies in the background saying, "We miss you, Dave." I knew the girls' nights consisted of dinner at a restaurant followed by club dancing, so nothing odd there. We'd even talked about what kind of dancing was acceptable and what wasn't. The call was unusual. If I were a skeptical guy, as she had just converted me into, I may have assumed the call was to confirm that I was at home when we signed up for our telephone plan. We may designate 3 cell phones, each of which could be called for free. She was able to make free calls from her cell to mine, ringing our landline with her cell phone. This time, when she slipped into bed and I reached for her pajamas, I was pushed back. "Sorry, honey. I'm so exhausted. Alarms are ringing." The following Tuesday, I emerged from underground, took a shower, returned to my office, and checked my phone. I observed that the second, third, and fourth mails I received had an odd symbol next to them. When I opened the first of these, my heart began to rush. Hell, here we go again. The first version was a text message received on her new phone. "Tuesday, 10 a.m. Hello, babe, love. Friday night. When can we do it again?" It was signed on Friday night. Mark. So who the hell was L? The second one was marked as going from her phone to his. "Tuesday, 12 p.m. Hello, Mark. I also enjoyed it. You know, I'm married and can't go there too often. We will let you know when." Trace. "Tuesday at 12:33 p.m. Fine, babe. You are one hot chick. Hurry back." Where were they? I would have liked to speak with one of her friends to check if Tracy was at a club with them all last night. But I couldn't see how I could get away with it if one unexpected possibility occurred. Tracy was not a heavy drinker. Therefore, he was always the designated driver on nights out. Could she be dropping her buddies home rather than going somewhere else? Her return time is 11 p.m. Midnight didn't allow it, but it was something to keep an eye on. I deleted all 3 texts after sending them to my work email. I finished my day and headed home. The next 2 weeks passed uneventfully, with the exception of one trade on Wednesday and Thursday. Wednesday, 6 p.m. Hello, babe. Haven't you forgotten about me? Mark. Thursday at 12:45 p.m. How can I forget a dancer like you? You haven't gotten away since the previous time. Trace. Now I was perplexed. I had known all week. She had a girls' night on Friday. Why didn't she inform him about it? I also wondered if she was aware that we hadn't had a date night in 3 months. I enjoy dancing as well, and she'd always insisted I was fine. I checked for messages every hour until she left the next day, and I kept my phone close throughout the evening. Nothing. Tuesday, 11 days since the last girls' night and 3 days until the next one. Tuesday at 12 p.m. Mark. Are you still up for a repeat, Trace? Tuesday, 12:03 p.m. Sure am. Hot lips, where and when? Tuesday, 12:07 p.m. Same place around the same time. Do not try to sit with us. Do not attempt to get more than 1 in 3. As I mentioned previously, behave yourself. I'm confused again. What was that about? 1 in 3 people are puzzled, which is not a good situation. Time to call a pal. I rushed from the guy. He ran the mine security business. We had grown very friendly in the time we had known each other. I planned to meet him that afternoon. I was hesitant to invite someone else in, but I couldn't think of a good reason to hire a babysitter. Besides, all of Tracy's pals knew me, and I would stick out and do what was necessary. I updated Guy on the essentials before asking if he could arrange for someone to observe Tracy in a club on Friday night. He apologized and promised to do it himself. I thanked him and stated that I would pay him since I did not want to disrupt our connection or his business with the mine. I explained that I couldn't pay him yet because Tracy was checking our accounts, but he assured me that my credit was good enough for him. I promised him I'd call him as soon as I knew where to begin tailing her. The next night, when Tracy reminded me of her night out, I casually asked where they were going to eat this week. She informed me that they normally went to the same Thai restaurant and gave me the address. We'd discussed this before, so it shouldn't be suspicious. I texted the details to Guy and suggested he begin the story around 8 p.m. I also sent him a snapshot of Tracy on Thursday. I requested him to keep me posted. Increased monitoring for the remainder of the week yielded only one text. Friday, 3 p.m. We're still on for tonight, Mark. After seeing off Friday night, I found it difficult to concentrate on playing with the children. At 7:30, I received a text from Guy and a visual of the restaurant. I put the kids to bed before 8:30 p.m. and settled in with my phone and laptop. Within a minute, the house phone rang. Tracy asked whether I had put the kids to bed yet since she wanted to say goodnight to them. When I mentioned that they were already in bed, she sounded disappointed and informed us that she missed us. It's time to pile on the guilt a little. I answered, "If you miss us so much, you could always stay home." This elicited no response, so I immediately responded with, "Well, enjoy your dancing. You know, it's been long since we danced together." She responded, "Yes, it has, hasn't it?" I made my excuses and hung up. I projected a date night suggestion from her within the next week. At 8:50 p.m., the unexpected ring of a misdirected text surprised me. I picked up the phone. Friday, 8:49 p.m. Mark is running a bit late. Trace, be there soon. It took me a minute to realize how significant this was. Then I got it. She had a second phone with her. I spent the next 2 minutes resisting the vengeful need to call her and tell her I missed her. What stopped me? I had a good sense of what she was doing, but not why. Weeks of musing had yielded no results, and without knowing why, I couldn't decide what to do next. 9:20 p.m. Guy texted that all of the girls at Star Bar were drinking and dancing together. "If you want to pay me $60 per hour plus expenditures for drinking and watching gorgeous chicks, just give me a call." I returned. I then removed the 2 texts. I spent the remainder of the evening watching cheating stories on YouTube. 11 p.m. text. "Everything is still here, dude." At 11:40 p.m. Guy called and I answered it. "They are departing now. Only the gals. Is that a good sign?" While Tracy was dancing with a large group of men, I asked him how his evening had gone. "Never use the same one twice in a row." I could tell Guy was hesitant. "Come on, Guy, spit it out. I can take it," I prompted. Every third or fourth dance, she would dance with the same guy. A couple of the other males tried to put their hands on her rear, but she turned them down and refused to dance with them again. When she danced with this guy, they always moved to the rear of the dance floor. They got smoochy, and I saw his hands on her bum, and she did not stop him. At the same time, she did not respond to him, and she had this neutral expression on her face. It was strange enough to stick in my mind. Just before they departed, I saw him go for a kiss, and she turned him down completely. "I apologize, Dave. I'm not sure what that all implies." I noticed he was wearing a wedding ring when he dropped her off at the table. I thanked him and called off. He wasn't the only one who didn't understand what was going on, but I believe he met Mark. Tracy should be home about 12:30 after dropping off her friends. At 12:20 a.m., I was in bed when my phone made the dreaded beep. Saturday, 12:19 a.m. "I told you not to do it in public." That confirmed that I deleted that message and turned down the level of the ringer so that any response he offered would not be heard. I'm lying in the darkened bedroom upstairs. 10 minutes later, I heard a car stop at the top of our driveway. I went to the window and glanced out to see a car's inside light turn on and off in the moonlight. I then noticed Tracy going down the driveway and around the side of the house. I dashed to the glass but didn't see her return at the back. I was still there when I noticed her lights coming down the driveway. I predicted that I'd find a phone stashed in the woodshed tomorrow. Be careful until the conclusion. That's my Tracy. It was summer, therefore I had no business going to the woodshed. I pretended to be asleep when she slipped in with me and made no attempt to snuggle. Was I noticing a pattern? A guilt-free night equals snuggles. Guilty night means no cuddling. Had she noticed I hadn't asked her for sex in 2 months? If she was following her list, she must be in a quandary. She was determined to keep our 4 to 5 sex episodes per month, but she also promised not to do anything out of ordinary. If I don't approach her, she will have to approach me more. That would be abnormal. Another restless night for me. I knew what was bothering me, and it was an issue identified over 2,500 years ago by a Chinese man named Sun Tzu in a book titled The Art of War. One of his memorable quotes was, "Strategy without tactics is a slow path to victory. Tactics without strategy are just noise before the final defeat. Your goal is to achieve a strategy. Tactics are how you intend to accomplish it." I knew my tactics were effective. What was my strategy? I did not have one. I reviewed what I knew. I knew that I did not want a divorce. I knew nothing good would come of it for me, and I would lose everything important to me. Revenge dreams were just that, dreams. This is the harsh and frustrating reality of all separations. During divorce, the partner who is not the primary caregiver is treated unfairly. You get screwed because you got screwed. I knew I needed to know how far Tracy would go with this. I knew if Tracy had sex with this guy, we were done. We might endure a kiss, but not sex. I was correct. Royally filled. Tracy's only chance of survival was to not travel too far. When I eventually fell asleep, I still lacked a strategy. The primary component was missing from the jigsaw. Why, Tracy? Why? My exhaustion and frustration nearly overwhelmed me the next morning. I got up early with the lads, and when I heard the upstairs toilet flush, I went back to bed until Tracy joined me. With not even a decent morning, I asked her from less than a foot away with a purposely blank expression on my face, "Did you have fun last night?" My tone and expression told her that something was awry. Her face remained still, but I could see the cringe in her eyes. 10 seconds of staring. Then she yawned, lay onto her back, and began rambling on about how lovely the dinner was and the club they went to afterwards. I listened carefully, and after she finished, I remarked, "Look, is there anything wrong with us? Are you not pleased with me? Have I done something wrong? Don't I give you enough support?" She vehemently disputed all of this while smothering me with kisses, claiming that I was the most loving, supportive husband and father a girl could ever hope for. She then urged me to never think like that again and asked why I brought it up. I only mentioned that things had changed. I reminded her that we hadn't had a date night in 3 months and couldn't recall when we had last made love. She told me that after my comments last night, she realized we had missed our date night and promised to make it up to me. She also claimed that we hadn't had sex in a long time because I hadn't brought it up and pestered her. I reminded her of several earlier talks in which I expressed my dissatisfaction with having to pester her all the time and how discouraging the rejections had been. She apologized. I had just finished reminding her that she should convey any worries about our relationship to me right away. When the lads saw she was awake, they yelled and began jumping all over us. Our children are the world's most effective contraception. The rest of the weekend was spent hugging, cuddling, kissing, and yes, sex. We enjoyed a wonderful family weekend, playing, riding, and feeding the ducks at the nearby park. It was Sunday before I could inspect the woodshed. Her phone was on a rafter underneath a box in the back. I had already received the 2 forwarded texts on my phone but had not read them. On Monday morning at work, I was relieved to have managed to keep the magic of the weekend alive. Saturday, 10 a.m. "I am very sorry, Trace, but you are stunning, and with your body so near to mine, I couldn't resist. You are all women, and I want you so much. Please forgive me, Mark. Hell, this guy's married. Saturday at 6 p.m. is your lack of response an indication that you do not want to see me again? That would destroy my heart once more. Sorry, Mark." Later that morning, the response came in. "Monday, 10 a.m., Mark. Sorry about the delay. I normally keep this phone secure at work and only check it on occasion. I have just received your Saturday messages. Yes, I was angry with you on Friday night. You understand my circumstance and my rules. I forgive you this time, but not again. You're such a talented dancer, and I'd love to see you again. I'm starting to feel the urge for our time together. I'll let you know when I can go out again. Please do not pester me. I hope you were taking efforts to keep texts like your last one from reaching your wife. Love, Trace. 3 minutes later. Work, phone, password protected. I'm glad to know we are still pals. Mark. Trying to control my rage. I couldn't believe I'd spotted 2 Traces in 12 hours. Loving wife and mother, followed by 3 or 4 who had responded a completely improper SMS from another man with affection. I knew I'd have a hard time holding myself together soon. I decided to take a break from watching stories and instead read about divided personalities. It was perhaps the only thing that made sense. That night I launched the charm attack and astonished myself by discovering several new ways to spoil her. She brought me a wonderful box of my favorite chocolates on Thursday, which surprised me. I even got to eat a couple before 2 ravenous lads discovered them and devoured the rest. Every night, we snuggled on the couch and spoke about work and family. When I chose to return to her office, it was almost as if I was venting my frustrations. I did it precisely the same as the previous time. I should not have been startled to see a permanent bank debit card in the bottom drawer, 3 packs of underwear, 1 box of panty liners, and 6 packs of douches. There are no condoms, though. I realized there were only 6 cards in her little pile, with 4 missing. I still couldn't comprehend their relevance, though. After this vacation, I headed straight home. There was no mention of the fact that I didn't have enough time to get to and from work, let alone spend more than 10 minutes there. I didn't care, though. My first warning of a girls' night on Friday came on the following Tuesday. I was a little stunned, so no acting was involved. When I looked at Tracy coldly and asked, "Aren't you forgetting something?" I maintained a hard glare while her mind raced. It took a good minute. I loved a few of her facial expressions before realizing what was going on. God, did I forget about our date night? I got up and walked away, throwing over my shoulder. Simply don't worry about it. She did not follow me to bed, and I'm not sure when she got up, but I heard soft sobbing wafting up the stairs. This was bizarre. Why? Sobs. All I could think about was regretting what she was doing to me and our relationship. So why don't we just stop? Dave, don't believe the impossible. Why not put a halt to something that was causing harm? Blackmail. No, this is impossible. This left only one possibility: compulsion. Something within herself compelled her to do this. The next night, she apologized profusely and stated that she had planned a night out for us on Saturday. She apologized again when I reminded her about our work function on Saturday. She then made all the required phone calls to reschedule the sitter for Friday and cancel the girls' night. That date night of food and dancing was a touch stiff, but it was fun. The strain was definitely getting to me. This stuff had been going on for 13 weeks, a month, and 2 additional girls. Nights later, things seemed typical. Apart from Mark's SMS asking if she could get away with blowing him off, the phone remained silent. Why would she meet him? Some evenings and not others. I reviewed her list and the 1 in 5 statement and recognized immediately what the dice was for. She reasoned that there couldn't be a pattern if the decision to meet him was left to chance. She was obviously following the script. I wondered if she had discovered any trackers or phone bugs yet. What about the 4 to 5 sex sessions with me per month? The thought of the dice only made the scenario more weird and impersonal. A weird word to use, but every successful manager understands that you start with a plan and then adjust it if circumstances change. I was aware that I had been exhibiting unpredictable behavior since the beginning of this, but she was keeping rather firmly to her plan, whatever it is. The following Tuesday, the text resumed. Tuesday, 1:45 p.m. Hey, do you remember me? How about the same place? Consume Colin, 30-ish, Saturday. Trace, Tuesday, 3:05 p.m. I will be there. Really? I look forward to it. Mark, time to call Guy again. My crystal ball told me that the girls' night was on Saturday this week. I called Guy and asked about his availability on Saturday. He stated he was free, but then asked me for a favor. His wife had given him a hard time the last time he worked for me, and he came home smelling like beer. He wanted to know if he could hand the phone to her so I could speak with her. I promised him I could do better than that and would be there in 15 minutes. Gloria could see by my enthusiasm that the offer was real. An hour later, I felt like I'd made a new buddy. Neither the guy nor Gloria were able to add. Any guesses as to why? I took the following afternoon off to see a behavioral psychologist. I needed to schedule the 2-hour session 3 weeks in advance to explain Tracy's recent actions. Such a waste of time. Apart from confirming that it was not a case of many personalities. She couldn't provide any insight. I paid with untraceable cash. I informed Guy about the planned meeting at the Star Bar at 8 p.m. on Saturday. I didn't want to alert Tracy by asking her about the restaurant this time. I kissed her goodnight and waited by the phone to get some exercise. I utilized the GPS locator, which showed that the phone was still in her workplace. There is no need to go to the woodshed this week. Yes, I have her now. When she left the restaurant, she called the landline to ensure I was home. God, hadn't she heard of private detectives? Dave, Guy only texted you once tonight. All of the girls in Club T are dancing with the guy from the last time. Again, Guy. He called me shortly after 10:45 p.m. They just departed. Who? Tracy? And her guy? Or all of them? The girls. He stayed here. I asked him what had happened. He said it was too hard and time-consuming to explain over the phone. He'd catch up on Monday. Screw that. I asked him if we could catch up tomorrow. I could not wait. He agreed. The next day at 10 a.m., I made up an excuse to go to work for a few hours and drove to Guy's house for coffee with him and Gloria. I received the entire story. Tracy had begun the night as usual, dancing with a large group of men, and every third or so dance with the assumed Mark persona, similar to the last time. When they danced, they shuffled to the rear, and his hands were in improper places. She spent a lot of time looking around and occasionally talking to him. Guy said it was so subtle that he doubted her companions who were dancing or sitting at the table would have known what was happening. A half hour before they all left, after dancing together, Mark escorted Tracy out a side door into the smoker's patio. Guy had followed them out as swiftly as he could, arriving less than a minute behind them. The courtyard was a tiny, fenced-off area. Mark and Tracy were sitting across from each other on one of the tables, holding hands, when a man walked through the door. Tracy instantly separated, and the guy proceeded to the other end of the little room and lit up. Now, Dave, I couldn't hear everything they discussed. Tracy's voice is pretty quiet, so I mostly heard what Shithead said. Many of the things I'll tell you next are based on assumption. He then told me what he had heard Sage remark shortly after the hands were withdrawn. Is this public figure cut? Tracy is not looking out of the corner of his eye. He caught enough of the next minute or so to realize that a sage was exclaiming how amazing and gorgeous she was, making his lust evident. Sage was simply leaning forward and looking into her eyes. She leaned backwards, away from him. I inquired what her eyes and expression were saying. Guy mentioned that she kept looking at the door and at him with a frightened expression. When she wasn't doing it, she had this peculiar neutral expression that had appeared unusual the previous time. SH then leaned back a little and spoke. Guy only caught around 1 out of every 3 words, but did not hear enough. Next level, Guy assumed a sage was laying on the strain. Tracy had a distressed expression on her face. She then spoke for around 2 minutes. It was her turn to lean in, so he missed a word, but she had a determined expression on her face and was thrusting her finger into the table. The top guy guessed she was putting down the rules again. They both stepped away and smiled once he finished his smoke. Guy took out his phone and pretended to text as an excuse to stay outside. Dave, I've got to notify you that they're planned to meet sometime next week. It was her suggestion, and she sounded frantic. I believe she was frightened of losing him and was throwing him a bone. Their tryst was over when one of the females stepped out and said she had promised her husband she would return home early that night. Tracy's behavior changed after that day. She was clearly distracted. Unless you pay attention to the children and myself. I wondered what had happened to her plan to self-monitor her behavior. I knew we were nearing a danger zone and promised to be extra vigilant. Me? So I kept up the charm offensive. Never be late for work. Always affectionate and compassionate. I'll let the next week's writings speak for themselves. Monday at 10:22 a.m. Babe, have you determined where and when? Monday at 12:23 p.m. Checking out sites after work today will notify you. Trace. I questioned the youngsters that night. Tracy picked them up from school. Tuesday, 9:37 a.m. How are you prepared for tomorrow? 1 p.m. It's just lunch. Okay. Do not get your hopes up. Make sure you park around the back. I'm all yours till 4:45 p.m. Trace. I love you. She provided the name and address of a location. I looked it up on Google and discovered that it was a 4-star restaurant and motel on the other side of the city near the airport. I called Guy and asked if he and Gloria would want lunch on me. He agreed. I asked him whether he thought Tracy might recognize him from the club. He didn't think so, as he wore a cap and kept his head down in the smoking garden. I also asked him if he may sit near them and perhaps capture their chat. He said he'd do whatever he could. I told him the place and time, along with one final command. The next morning, I double-checked her bag. Nothing. I wondered if her desk drawer now included condoms. It was not worth the effort to find. She was clearly intending to have Mary pick up the kids. I wondered what excuse she'd make. I didn't think it would be working late because she was aware that I occasionally phoned into the office out of fear for her safety at work. Probably meeting a girlfriend after work. I fully intended to be home early to see what she was wearing and test her lying abilities, when I asked where she'd been. Guy made the phone call around 1:45 p.m. was expected, but his news was unexpected. He was in the restaurant and they hadn't arrived. I went into a panic. Were they in a room? I informed him Tracy's automobile and waited while he examined all the available parking spaces. Nothing. I called Tracy's desk phone and was disappointed when Jenny answered it. Has Tracy already gone home? No, we have a lot going on today. Larry wanted us to remain till 3. Tracy has just gone out for lunch. Well, tell her I called to say hello. Please, bye. What was going on? I checked my phone. It detected a redirected voice call from Tracy to Market. 11:02. That morning I was underground and missed it. Tracy had violated protocol with the phone call. I envisioned her finding an excuse to leave the workplace for a few minutes to do so. I could only guess what she would have said if she had called to tell him she had to work late. They might have devised new strategies, but what were they? I took a punt. I'm guessing they merely postponed by 24 hours. I called and told Guy. He stated he wasn't available, but after checking, he told me Gloria and a friend were. Could I switch phone numbers and give Gloria some instructions? Nothing was guaranteed, so what could I do? There were no texts between the couple, so I felt confident. My guesses had been correct. Tracy called my work phone at 11:30 a.m. and asked if I could slip into town for lunch. Sorry, sweetheart. Too preoccupied with confidence. I was not intending to surprise her at work. She fled for a backstabbing tryst. I watched the GPS tracker as her phone approached the planned suburb. I called and alerted Gloria. Gloria made the following phone call. You were correct. They just arrived in different automobiles and are in the restaurant. It's quite comical. She parked next door, hidden behind a hardware store. I asked her where he'd parked, and she said directly in the motel parking lot. I asked her for his license plate number. She read it aloud, then explained that the car had thunderstruck construction on the side. Gotcha. I persuaded Gloria to enter the restaurant so that she would not miss out. She told me her companion was already inside. While waiting, I peered up at the thunderstruck construction. I called their receptionist and, using my weak acting skills, explained that I had met one of their employees but couldn't remember his name. It was either Mick or Mark. She explained that they needed to blend and make one Mark. She asked me to describe him, so I repeated the description Guy had given me. This sounds like Mark Ashcroft, our business development manager. Would you prefer his cell phone number? I said yes, and she read aloud the now familiar number. 5 minutes and a phone book later, I had an address for him in Ashcroft. Eat your heart out, Sherlock. Gloria called at 4 p.m. They left in separate automobiles. I made plans to meet her at a coffee shop halfway between the city and the mine, and left. I started by asking Tracy what she was wearing. She stated it resembled a business outfit. I then inquired whether she had heard her use a pet name for him, beginning with L. Gloria stated that they were at the table next to them and had heard the majority of what was said, and she had only referred to him as Mark. I then passed the floor over to Gloria. She described them as sitting opposite one another at a tiny, intimate table. Dave, I thought you mentioned she was intelligent. I simply raised an eyebrow. This guy is a scum-sucker. A sleek scum-sucker is nonetheless a scum-sucker. He's obviously playing her, and she's falling for it all. Gloria then proceeded to tell me a recap of their chats. He spent the first portion telling her how lovely she was and how much he desired her. He was holding her hand across the table, and she made no attempt to untangle it. I suppose she did not contemplate this in public. Tracy spent a lot of time looking about the restaurant and out the windows. Multiple times. She tried to redirect the talk to me and her family or his family, but he cut her off and changed the subject. She did slip in the fact that she loved me deeply and that I was her soulmate so that no one would ever find out about them. She apologized for the precautions she thought she needed to take, but hoped he understood. She then explained the safeguards he should take. He never talked about his wife. However, he did ask the obvious question. Why did she love me so much? Gloria stated that Tracy never responded and instead gave a blank expression before changing the subject. The middle chats revolved upon favorite movies, literature, and interests. She had never passed up an occasion to tell Tracy how much they shared in common. The last hour was shithead, gradually increasing the pressure, intermingled with compliments about how attractive he thought she was. While holding her hand, he encouraged her to take their friendship to the next level. Tracy kept attempting to withdraw her hands and change the subject of discussion, but he insisted. He continued asking her how they could get together for more than one covert dance, 3 nights at a club, or more than lunch. He asked if she had ever traveled for work. No. Have I ever traveled? Extremely rare. Could she skip girls' night and go somewhere with him to dance alone? She stated that she couldn't risk one of the girls spilling something. Could she pretend she was going on a girls' night and then go out with him? No. Same reason he was visibly frustrated at this point. So he flung it back at her. How did she recommend that they become together? Tracy said that her only option was to pretend to work past lunch one day, giving them 1 p.m. to 4:45 p.m., almost 4 hours. He commented that I must be a very suspicious person for her to take so many measures. Tracy looked blank and replied, No. Dave loves and trusts me, so 1 out of 2 isn't terrible, shithead. Then obviously it was time to issue an ultimatum. Maybe we'll get a room next time. Play about a bit. Tracy, armed and aired for a while, said she only wanted the lunches but did not shut him down. He stated that he was unsure whether he could remain in a relationship that was not progressing. Tracy apparently looked. Mark was clearly an impatient individual. However, 3 dance evenings and 1 lunch didn't seem like much to him. It had taken 4 months. He just got 2 hand-holding sessions and some ass groping. According to Gloria, the session finished well before 4 p.m., with him stating that he needed to depart following the final application of pressure. He attempted to pay the bill, but when she discovered he intended to use his personal credit card, she insisted they use her debit card. She said that it was something I didn't know about. The cheeky scumsucker even told her he admired her diligence. He led her to her car, and they remained unseen behind the hardware shop for nearly 5 minutes. They couldn't tell anything from his expression when he returned and got into his car. She may be thorough, but she is also observant. She clearly was not. Apparently, the 2 ladies who ate lunch together had the next table but didn't really talk. Didn't appear suspicious. Gloria noticed that some of the afternoons had appeared weird. The primary one was that Tracy was clearly out of shithead's league. What was a good-looking female with a decent figure doing swooning over an ordinary-looking short and weedy guy with thinning hair? That one, I could answer. I mentioned to Gloria that Tracy had a negative body image as a result of her mother's witchcraft. I also emphasized that despite my past attempts, I had not been able to improve it. I almost forgot to ask her if she had managed to record any audio. She took out her phone and played a couple audio files, but nothing was audible, just a broad background noise. She did show me 3 images she had managed to snap with her phone. The one who was holding hands was wounded. I asked her to forward them to my work email. She was correct. He was somewhat of a weed. After thanking Gloria, I arrived home a half hour later than normal. Everything appeared to be normal, except Tracy made very little eye contact. She was still in her work clothes, and her makeup appeared normal. That night, I confirmed with the kids that their babysitter had picked them up from school. I found an excuse to venture outdoors after dark and discovered only the phone in the woodshed. A handbag search the following morning showed nothing new during a weekend drive-by of his residence. I did see his work car in the driveway. There was also a tricycle and a swing set in the front lawn. He sent almost daily texts throughout the next week, becoming increasingly demanding. She eventually surrendered and agreed to meet him on the next girls' night, so the dice must have been put away. She insisted on only dancing with him once in 3, as she always did, and assured him she would not be going anywhere alone with him. This time, I used gentle pressure by informing her that I had to work until 10 p.m. on Friday and requesting that she arrange for a sitter. She didn't ignore him, but I bet there was no ass-grabbing that night. I did not bother Guy. There were no unusual movements from the home that night, and the woodshed received an extra visitor that weekend. The texts the following week were so aggressive that I worried they might break up. I didn't want that because I knew I wouldn't have the energy to watch her start over with another guy, which I was confident she would do. What can I do to keep my wife from breaking up with her boyfriend? I grinned to myself, wondering if that question had ever been asked before in the history of mankind. She finally agreed to another lunch date about 2 weeks after their initial one. I was curious if she was using the 10-sided dice or the 20 Tuesday 9:40 a.m. How are you preparing for lunch tomorrow? Trace, Tuesday, 9:42 a.m. Cannot do tomorrow. What about Thursday, Mark? Tuesday, 10:01 a.m. That works for me. She then gave them the name of another 4-star motel that was far from their starting place and open at 1 p.m. again, Tuesday at 10:10 a.m. Do they have good rooms, Mark? Tuesday, 10:41 a.m. Let's see, shall we? Love, Trace? I contemplated the ambiguity of the final remark. Did she imply they'd see what the rooms looked like after they got one? Or did she imply they'd see if they could get a room after they arrived? I quickly called Guy and made plans to visit him that afternoon. We devised a series of contingency plans, and I assured him I'd give him everything he needed for all of them Thursday morning in case they went to the restaurant. Guy was going to be the only diner at the next table. I didn't want to brief another stranger at this point, and Gloria wasn't an option anymore. Gloria volunteered to remain in the car outside with a camera. I considered another office raid on Wednesday night, but decided not to. I was simply beyond caring. A handbag search Thursday morning yielded nothing. I made my delivery to Guy on Thursday at 10 a.m. and asked him to call me as soon as he or Gloria made them. If they did, I would beg off from work and drive home. I went next door and asked Mary if she could pick up the lads from school and keep them at her house until I arrived. I told her I was arranging a surprise for Tracy and not to tell her. That was not a lie, was it? She, of course, informed me that Tracy had already made arrangements for her to sit that afternoon, Thursday at 1:10 p.m. text. They're both inside the restaurant. Gloria, there is a guy in place. At 2:20 p.m., Gloria called and said, Dave, the delivery has been made. I pressed the send button on the text that had been resting on my phone for the previous hour, winging its way from one phone to another. The number, which I was not allowed to know, was a simple message. It was received 30 seconds later by a sobbing woman sitting on the floor outside a motel room. A fantastic mother and partner, but a lady I had doubts about trusting again. Tracy, please come home. Dave. I dialed a different number immediately after sending the message. I was not supposed to know when it was responded. I said, Mr. Mark Ashcroft of 12 Freeman Road. I only got a mumble in return. I continued, My name is David. You know who I am. Just walk away immediately, and maybe your future will not include wheelchairs and facial repair surgery. Go now. I didn't need to fake any venom. That final element. I hung up. Gloria told me later that this is what happened. Tracy got up from the table at 2:15 p.m. to pay the restaurant bill. Mark exited the restaurant and went to the check-in desk. Guy dropped $100 on his table and dashed out the door, pointing the money to the waitress. He dashed out the door, rushed to the car, and informed Gloria it was showtime. He waited more than a minute after removing the goods from the back seat before strolling slightly behind the target pair. But on the other side of the parking lot, the man paused to slide the key into a room door. Guy accelerated soon as the door opened. Guy spoke from directly behind Tracy, Mrs. Tracy Brown, who turned to face him with a puzzled expression. Guy presented her with a bouquet of lilies, her favorite flowers, with the words, Dave wants you to know how much the children and he care for you. Guy had to drop his loads as Tracy's face lost all color, and her knees buckled and she fell like a rock. If he hadn't caught her, she would have definitely hurt herself. Guy groaned and looked at Mark with a bewildered expression on his face. He was completely focused on his phone until he heard Mark's car burning rubber down the road. Guy kept me informed throughout the next hour as Gloria assisted Tracy. It took that long to get her up and calm her down enough she could drive away safely. They both declined to say anything in response to her questioning. They claimed that when she wasn't crying, she appeared dazed. They advised she check her phone's messages just before they left. She began sobbing again as the significance of one message became clear. The motel manager came out and inquired whether they needed an ambulance over the phone. Guy updated me on the interaction between the two lovebirds in the restaurant. Tracy had attempted to make small talk, but Shithead quickly began putting increasing pressure on no room, no future type comments. Or, as we used to say when I was young, on your back or on a bicycle. Tracy eventually gave in to pressure, but she made it clear that she could not make any promises. Did she truly feel she was saying no? Was there an alternative once they got a room? Gloria emailed me a video clip before Tracy arrived home, which shows Shithead literally dragging her into the room. I finally saw Tracy's renowned blank expression, so now I'm sitting at home waiting for my wife to arrive. I'm sure it will be a slow excursion that may include a stop at an office and some trash cans. I'm quite relaxed when I drink a glass of my favorite Islay, Moth. Am I relaxed because I am in the mood, I hear you say? No, I'm relaxed because I've finally figured it all out. It began Monday night. While Tracy was studying, I sat on the couch with my laptop. I was going through a list of stories when one title caught my attention and prompted a recollection. A smart group of cheaters. I watched it again, and before I could finish, the final piece of the puzzle slipped into my brain. I now know for certain why, and it is quite depressing. I discounted the impossible. This was all that remained. Tracy had spent nearly her whole childhood believing she was inferior to everyone around her mother, etc. She married a guy she knew she was smarter than. Then, multiple IQ tests revealed that she had been incorrect. Her last 4 months had been a subconscious power grab, and she had succeeded in winning over others. Someone wiser than her would covertly and effectively demonstrate her intelligence. Having an affair and getting away with it would establish her dominance. She would have been content with the emotional aspects of the romance. The physical aspect was a sad necessity. Her repeated blank expression represented her psychological separation from her acts. The entire episode was a compulsion in a broken soul. If she had dumped Mark and tried again with someone less forceful, and had only an emotional or restricted physical affair with someone else, she could have completed her therapy to her satisfaction. That is, assuming she hadn't been hijacked by some lucky scumsucker. Yes, it's me again. I knew the cards on her desk were for prospective candidates at clubs. This brings us to the mysterious L. Well, I believe that stood for lover. She didn't have a candidate in mind when she created the list. By Tuesday night, I had made a choice about our future. I employed a procedure that I had previously used well, but had forgotten in the midst of the activity. It is an almost perfect method for making difficult decisions, and I will share it with you, my friends, on 2 pieces of paper. Write to lists on a single sheet. Write all of the reasons for the decision on the other. Write all of the arguments against. The next crucial step is to reduce each list to 1 or 2 words. Look at these words, and the answer will generally appear. In my situation, one page that supported 4 giving Tracy had family influence on children's income, practically normal love life, and sexual activity. There are no attorneys, and life is relatively normal in general. The opposite page featured pride, attorneys, shame, loneliness, the loss of children, and so on. The summary words, which I'll let you figure out which corresponds to which page, were messed and almost cheerful. 15 milliseconds later, the decision was reached. I took another sip, smiling. If I were a scumbag, I'd invite my new friends Guy and Gloria over for a BBQ this weekend. I am not a scumsucker. Did anyone note at the beginning of this article that I took an extra year to complete my degree? Until recently, I had regretted spending my first year pursuing my major job path. Psychology. Not anymore. Once I figured out why, the what was obvious. My entire effort today had been intended at psychologically and permanently shattering Tracy's belief that she was smarter than me, the person in Gloria's description. I'd succeeded. I briefly sympathized with her pain, but what more could I have done? I would not tell Tracy how I had caught her. Keeping her guessing should increase the chances. This never happened again. Perhaps I might tell her I am a mind reader. There was no doubt that Tracy's near future would include counseling. The themes would undoubtedly include our intelligence issues, her confidence issues, and her body image concerns. I would try to assist with all of things as best I could, but I haven't had much luck thus far. If the body image counseling did not meet my expectations, sex therapy may be necessary. An onlooker may have been surprised. Knowing my condition 5 minutes before, Tracy slowly drove down the driveway to find me laughing. I had finally located the list that had started this whole process. Remember the one that took me months to complete? I had finally discovered it, tucked away in a pocket of my briefcase where I had placed the bloody thing. Knowing that mothers returning to work after their children began school was a hot spot for cheating, and the dumb schmuck husband was frequently the last to know. I had compiled a list of indicators of an unfaithful wife. I may be a dumb schmuck, but I was a lucky dumb schmuck. I was giggling because there were 2 items on my list that Tracy did not have. She had one on hers, but not on mine. I've always liked irony. If I had simply looked for the indications on my list, I would not have found her. The only thing that could have succeeded was the bluff approach. I had too much respect for her to ever humiliate her by accusing her of cheating merely to see how she reacted. I knew I would be magnanimous in victory. As I saw the car come down the driveway, I stood up to give my wife a great hug, and the rest of my life began. A month later, during a post-crisis midnight office raid, a wholly innocent bottom drawer was discovered. I made no comment when Tracy's old iPhone was replaced one day by an iPhone 4. One day, we checked our bank statement and discovered an unaccounted-for deposit. $652. Guy never charged me for his services. Remember, he was a security guard and not an API. His life was comprised of 12-hour stretches of trying to stay awake. He had enjoyed the excitement. Furthermore, he and Gloria both stated that they had enjoyed it, and that it had helped them bond more strongly. I did insist on paying expenses, however. When he announced that he was selling his firm later that year, I presented the soppy old golf addict a gift certificate valid at the town's largest golf shop. The voucher is valued at $652 per month. After things calmed down, Tracy was clearly too humiliated to mention girls' nights out. I demanded she get on the next one. After consulting her counselor, she agreed. I also asked her to bring a buddy into her confidence, if she wanted to cry on a female shoulder. The only condition I put on it was that if she saw Mark at a club, she should call me. 3 months later, she did call. I hurriedly walked next door to request that the sitter stay in our home in case the kids awoke. I headed to the Star Bar and gently requested Tracy to point out Shithead for me. When she pointed to him, he looked over and noticed us as I immediately approached him on the dance floor. He jumped out the nearest door out of sheer instinct. Yes, you guessed it. The one leading into the fenced-in smoking area, the one without an exit. I grabbed him by the neck with one hand to silence any screams. The mining business does not breed children. While I waited for him to stop struggling, I respectfully asked the 3 smokers to leave so that I could speak with the man who had tried to screw my wife. They obliged, even grinning as they passed by me. Nobody enjoys dealing with jerks. I then checked the area for cameras. When he had calmed down, I growled at him with all of my pent-up rage that had yet to be vented. Listen, shithead, if Tracy ever reports seeing you again, or if I discover you have disappointed your wife and children in any way, the first thing I will do is send copies of all your texts to Tracy to your wife. I'll send her my contact information if she wants copies of the images I have. The second thing that will happen is that the sound of all the breath leaving his body as my fist impacted him right under the diaphragm was almost as wonderful as seeing him writhing on the floor, looking for the breath that would not come. The kick to the nuts was probably needless. Okay, so maybe I'm a bit of a scum sucker. I walked back into the club to hug and kiss Tracy. She inquired, "Am I going to have to post bail later?" "No, my sweetheart, we're both much too smart for that." I then exited the front door. Tracy was left to explain her friend's perplexed expressions less than 3 minutes after they walked in. I remembered the old phrase, "Beware the fury of a quiet man." Dear listeners, please leave your opinions in the comments box below and remember to like, share, and subscribe.